Anyways, name is Eduardo Kastner. I'm the CTO for Worldwide Partner Group. It's a brand new role in area within Microsoft. The idea is to have representation for our partners, not only in the engineering teams and the marketing teams, but also to build on strategies like the one I just mentioned as an example, et cetera, but also to gather knowledge and to build knowledge for the community. It is very interesting because if you ask me what is a partner, I still don't want to define it, right? Because now the blurs of, if you want to talk about really old school terms like co-opetition and frenemies and this and that, and I don't believe in any of that. I think that the world is big enough now that none of us are going to survive without each other. So customers are becoming partners, partners are becoming ISVs, ISVs are becoming, so the lines are getting really blurry and we better get used to it. So with that said, I think that's a really good start to this session. I want to propose this session in 3 parts, but again, I didn't get the 3-hour time slot. I got the 45-minute one, right? And I got yesterday another time slot for another aspect of this. So if you want to understand this topic in my brain at least, or what I've seen in the last 3 years, to give you a little bit of context, I created the Cloud Solution Architect role in Microsoft and was responsible for building and hiring that community of 1,400 people in the last 3 years. So it's been an awesome journey. So I've learned a lot, more than anything else. And the learning came in 3 dimensions, right? The first dimension is, how do you build a role? How do you build a skill? And that was what I was trying to also, little taunt before the session. The second one is, what do you learn? Way more important than what do you know is, what do you learn? What are you learning from others, right? What are the best practices? What are the patterns? What is a pattern? Because I don't know if you realize, and this is pretty sad, in our profession, we have no formal nothings. Now you say, how dare you say that, sir? Well, think about a doctor, right? I mean, the practices, the formats, think of an architect, think of a civil engineer, think of an applied mechanics engineer. They have a lot more formality, maybe because they've been more centuries on this earth than us, but we have very little formality. So if I tell you, give me an architecture, you're going to give me anything you think a diagram is versus what I think an architecture is. Fair? And then you're going to say, no, this was defined in the 70s by IBM. Yeah, and then deprecated, and then before that, DEC, and before that, yeah, I'm also an old timer, but still, we didn't permeate these things. They didn't stick with us, sadly, right? So some of the formalities of days old and galore didn't stick. So what we learn. And the third aspect is what I talked about yesterday, which is, what are the formal processes that we're seeing some people take in cloud adoption? So I'm not going to cover that one. That was I covered yesterday. But you're going to get a ton from this session in 2 fronts. I can go as deep as code if you want, but that's not the point of this session. So please, if you're expecting demos or code, don't get me wrong, rate the session however you want, but that's not what you're going to get. So I like to be very clear since the beginning. This is not a session for code or demos. This is a session for patterns and architectures. It's a little bit different. Fair? Second, there are some foundational building blocks that you may all get, and then I apologize. If everybody here gets it, then I apologize, but that's not what I think. I'm running on the hypothesis because I've worked with, like I said, hiring 1,400 expert practitioners of cloud, and I realized after seeing 500 patterns literally per month, that people did not have this list of 10 things you got to do to get an enterprise-grade cloud. So that's where I'm going to spend the biggest part of my session. Now, again, I know you're going to go like, duh, I get this one. Well, if you get 1 out of the 10, you already got value. But if you got 5 or 7, it's awesome. My point is, it's the list that's really important and the formality on the list. Cool? Okay, I hope that that's what you want to get. So let me start with 2 slides that I really like, which are, how do you architect in the cloud? And if you think of a transportation company, you're going to pretty much find that they have very standard systems that have been built over the last 30 years in whatever technology you wish. But the point is that every color of a system database or set of records, et cetera, there is going to be a different brand probably, or a different set of technologies. And there's no badness, right? When you grow being very successful with an Oracle database, what do you think you build, you architect your next solution on, right? I mean, it's not cold knowledge, it's called trust. It's you know how to do something, and I call that platform familiarity. So once you get platform familiarity on SQL, guess what do? Oh, that's awesome. Let me turn this off. I think I should. So what I mean by that is that it's not bad that you choose technology A or B. It's really bad that you think that in this brand new, wonderful cloud world where you can do a ton of stuff, you only use the hammer. You see my point? So if you're only going to use a hammer for everything, then it's the old joke, right? Everything looks like a nail. But the old joke also has a big curse in it, is you cut things with a hammer, which makes no sense. And so in order to do any type of transition of data, mutation of data, transformation, reporting, BI, whatever, you end up using something called middleware. And that middleware means that you need marriage counseling for 3 DBAs, and 2 system administrators, and 4 developers, and oh, God forbid you bring the developers. And then you need two psychologists for all those people together, and then marriage counseling for the whole group, and then psychology support, and then maybe 6 months later, you got a design of a pattern that extracts data from 3 sources and ends up with a report. Fair? Well, that's what we've created. We've created a fantastic spaghetti that is complex, and if you call that job security, I don't. Because today, somebody can come in, actually extract the data from these things, and build a report in an afternoon and make you look pretty silly. So you got to be very careful, because technologies are advancing way faster than our capacity to get to trust them, to get to agree with them, to get to know them. So it's really an interesting world, because if I show you the same architecture, this is exactly the same systems of record. In other words, if you didn't find a single source of truth here, you're not going to find a single source of truth here. So stop looking for unicorns. Is that fair? It's still going to be several systems that create the system of record. But what you find here is very different. You find here an Ingress node that does not have a capacity limitation. So I'm not limited to 100 logins per second, because I did it as a function, or I did it as a worker role, or I did it as a logic app, and therefore as many as I need, I'm going to use. And then you have an Ingress node which could pretty much be a couple of worker roles with autoscale, but more interestingly enough, have a stream at the end. And a stream is not a database, it's a computational capacity of, think of a mathematical engine that will transform the data enough so that then I can go into a sharding node. And the sharding node, or analysis nodes, or analytics node, as I called it there, is going to pretty much select what type of data goes where. So it's more of a sorter and a filer than anything else. And that thing is going to put the appropriate types of data into different types of databases as per the need that I'm going to have going forward. So the first database, and I know I'm not being exact to the diagram, so stay with me, but it could be blobs, it could be tables, it could be queues. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't necessarily have to be a branded database per se. It could be even blob records, right? And the second one could be a data lake, or could be standard SQL, could be MySQL, could be Mongo. I still don't care. Could be DocumentDB. And the last one could be Hadoop, or it could be Insights, or et cetera, right? So the point is simple. The point is, depends on what you need to use and what you need to build is what tool you should be using. So in today's world, you got to experiment a lot more than you ever did. Fair? And so you got to be getting used to. You have to start working on getting used to experimenting really fast and trying different technologies really fast. The problem that we have is that we're all engineered types, right? I'm not going to say you're an engineer, I'm not an engineer. Well, no, it's just we're all engineer types, and we all like to tinker. So once I give you the ability and the knowledge to melt plastic and create your own tones of color, we all love to create Lego blocks. And so yours are more to the left, and mine are more to the right, and bigger, smaller, hexa blocks, da-da-da. And you know what we end up building? We end up building blocks. And if I ask you, are you going to build a solution? You see my point? Are you going to build a... You can be as engineer or more engineer. You know, I like the chest thumping, right? I am more technical than you, so I can build a deeper VM with more, or whatever. Sure, I can compile the kernel and be more embedded, yes, but what are you spending your time on? Because I urge you, be careful. You're not spending your engineering knowledge on anything, you're spending your time. And time is the only commodity that you don't spend again. You see where I'm going? So you got to select if you're going to go crazy on the specific asset and building assets over and over and over. And yes, I'm talking about VMs or databases, or if you're going to spend time building solutions. And it is 2 different breeds of people, and we need both. But my point is, not everybody can go to one side of that table. It does not work anymore. And so this is the really fun part. I'm going to try to present to you a couple of scenarios that came through our cloud solution architects. The solutions, some of them were developed with partners, some of them with customers, etc. They're all sanitized. I love this format. It is not a formal architecture design, so please understand I had to go very careful with how much I presented so that I would be sanitized enough, right? So I wouldn't get into trouble. But I think it's enough so that I can talk to you about the solution, get you excited about what we're seeing. Cool? So this go all over the map. The first one is a bank in Western Europe who came to this solution architect and said, I have a ton of audio files. They're all encrypted as per a Basel regulation. If those of you who don't know what that is like the Sarbanes-Oxley bit of Europe, EMEA. And basically the problem that we have is that all these files are pretty much dead weight, right? They're right there, but we don't know what to do with them, okay? They're just there for compliance. And so this solution architect said, can I get a couple of samples? And he got something like, I don't know if it was 10 or 15 samples. And he asked for another meeting in a week, right? So it's from a Thursday to a Thursday. And he went home and he created this architecture and created this experiment. And he presented no slides. He just went back and presented the solution next Thursday. Let me explain to you what he did exactly. So he converted the file because LUIS back then, our language analysis or language sentiment analysis, a cognitive service of Cortana Analytics, did not take at the time audio files, it only took text files. So he had to convert it to text, right? But right now it takes audio files, so it'd be a different story if he would have done it 3 months later. And that's the speed of this, right? But the cool thing is, with the first storage, he put all the files on a blob store, then he passed them through a worker role. All you understand what a worker role is? I'm going a little, there you go, so I don't need to explain all this, thank you. So a worker role, he just published his code, he did this in .NET, he converted the file to text, and then he passed it through an indexer and bifurcated it into two things. One is he stored the file to a DocDB and an Azure search so that it could be searched later, right? So if you want to say, hey, I want to see all the calls of blah on this date, whatever, you can search on all the stuff, created the metadata. But on the lower path, it's really interesting. He passed it through LUIS, got sentiment analysis on the inference of the words, because you don't have tone anymore. Today you also have tone, which is really cool. You can see if the guy is excited or mad or whatever. And in fact, I love the people who come to me and after they've processed this in their brain, they say, oh, but this would be very different for Japan versus for Germany versus I'm from Mexico. From Mexico, right? Or from Argentina. It's like people in Latin America would be screaming, which like the French, the Italian. People in Japan, it's completely different inference of the words and of the annotation. In fact, in China, where annotation of words and how you say them is so important to the phrase, be completely different. Yes, that's how you train the model, dude. Relax. If you train it to, 2 weeks with Chinese, what you get out of it is, you see my point? So no badness here. That's the whole really cool thing about this. No badness, it's on what you train it to do. But what he got is the sentiment analysis, and then he divided on intents and entities. Why? Because this was the call center that got all calls. Credit card, bank movements for bank accounts, investments and investment types. So then he piped that through a stream and he put it on a database to then pipe it to Power BI. Essentially, you're going to see that this is in Spanish, but what he created is a couple of things. The first thing is a real-time analysis engine that then not only understood the caller intentions, but he got, hey, is the caller calling on what action? Because understand, the first is you have to divide this on actions, right? Are you calling because of a credit card or a bank account or whatever? And what's the action that you're requesting? So it understands the action that you're requesting. Then it understands the sentiment, as in when somebody said cancel, were they happy? Were they mad? How do you do that? By inference of the words next to it, okay? And tone. Now, then what you do is you measure by an index of 0 to 1, 1 being super, super duper happy, which never happens, 0 being, tremendously bad emotions. You annotate how good is the sentiment of the calls, but then you also say what are the words most used, and per word or per action, why is all this cool? He went back, presented this to the bank, to the call center manager. The guy was blown away, wanted this next day implemented. It was awesome. This is what's called an augmented scenario. Let me explain. There's nothing else that could do this. So it's not like, oh, my existing solution doesn't, I'm going to upgrade it. No, there's none of that. And there's no competition for this solution either, right? This is something that you find in the sense of, hey, you're not doing this through anything else, but this also spans across multiple things that you do today. So going into the cloud and augmented solutions is really simple. Most people are saying, go into IaaS, go into PaaS, go into this, go into re-architecture. Sure, and IaaS is still the biggest dog in the cloud world, sure. But some of the coolest, fastest, and biggest budget adoption or budget assignment asks are stuff like this. When you can find the cool scenario, a cool little experiment that shouldn't take you long, but that eventually gives you a really strong hold on the business. Now, I'm going to show you 5 more, by the way. So be patient. Completely different engines, right? But the point is this cool? Okay. Last but not least, he went back and he said, hey, wouldn't it be great if I can also correlate actions? So in other words, if, I don't know, this gentleman called today and said, hey, you know, I'm super mad. You raised my APR. I've been paying my credit card on time for 17 years with you, but now you raised the interest because I was late once and I didn't even notice I was traveling. Well, yeah, of course, human interaction can decide what to do, but the other thing that's interesting is that the history of this tool could tell you the last 3 actions that this gentleman took is he transferred money from his investment to banking, and he set up a SWIFT or whatever transfer internationals. So inference, he's about to cancel. He's about to exit. So give him 0 APR for 6 months and tell him how much we love him. I'm not kidding. This is mind-blowing. And you're going to say, oh my God, my privacy. Which privacy? I didn't do anything incorrect. I read your own actions on my website, and I was a little smart about it. I treated you like you want to be treated, like a person, and not like one more number. Is that not, no? Did I miss anything? So what's really cool about this is this actually gives you back the ability to be a little bit more of a customer-centric focus, which is really cool. So some of these systems, the business is dying to implement versus the typical how many VMs, how fast? Come on, take your order, dude, come on, you know? And they're like, I'm not here to, not here to take VMs. Next one. There you go. This is a really cool one as well. Well, everyone is really cool, but I get excited with all of them. I'm sorry. This one's really cool because usually this is a online travel agency. Think of a massive, one of the big dogs of online travels, and one of the continents, I'm not going to tell you which, but because again, I want to be fair to whoever built this. But what was really cool about this is they came to us and they said, we have a problem. We have, every time you buy online a travel, a package, or whatever, flight, a hotel, what you get is the online survey, which some people fill it out, some people don't. We also send then back an email requesting online surveys, or in some cases, we do calls, right? So call center calls back and whatever. So we have those 3 methods, and they're not necessarily aggregated. So the marketing manager of the product line doesn't necessarily see aggregation of those engines, but that's fine. That's not killer. That's 3 sources. They can do it in their brain with an Excel spreadsheet. What's interesting is they said, we also want to measure Google plus Twitter and Facebook, in other words, online sentiment analysis around this. Now that gets really messy. Why? Because if I start asking you the cool questions, you don't want to answer them. It's too complex. Example, do you mean that this gentleman over here, he bought something, so I want to see if on his Facebook page he said that he's happy? Or did you mean that I want to just sense anybody saying that they bought something from me and they're happy? Or that they said something about the product and they're happy? Or that everybody that's going to Atlanta is happy? You see what I'm saying? What are you trying to ask? So the question becomes very complex. So what this thing does is it basically aggregates intentions. It also aggregates all the sources, and it puts them on a portal for each one of the marketing line managers. How complex is it? You're seeing it on the screen. That's the actual architecture. Yes, everything I'm presenting to you is a POC. In other words, a proof of concept. No, I'm not going to present to you any production level systems because you wouldn't want me to present your own. Right? So everything I'm showing to you is a POC. That's why it's safe. But this is pretty cool. So far, so good? You want me to go deeper into the architectures rather than the story, or this is good? Okay, remember, if you provide no feedback, I keep doing whatever I want. So you better provide some feedback. Basically, this is a 3-tier aggregation of web jobs with a SQL DW, so the SQL Data Warehouse on Azure. And we're using machine learning as well as text analysis from the cognitive services to analyze not only intent and behavior, but also inference and relationship. The really interesting one is the part where we're analyzing a social media sentiment analysis. And that's also another one of our listening engines. So let me say this very simple. You not having to create all this is a big deal. Now you tell me, no, dude, I don't want that. I want to build my own machine learning algorithms. Come work for us. Stop doing it where you are doing it. It's the wrong place. But you see where I'm going? You can't do this. You could never build this if you don't use components. So when I showed you the car, you thought I was kidding, right? You thought I was just being kind. No, tell me, please. I mean, educate me. How would you build this without components? Without ready-made, self-integrated, and working components? Not things that you got to spend, and yes, I'm hitting half of my competition here, but why not? Because I believe that the strategy that we're doing is pretty cool for a reason. Not something that you need to take 7 months and 30 programmers to make worthy of an integration. Something that I can take in an afternoon on a Sunday and give it a shot. See, that's the thing that I'm very proud of what we're building, with all due respect. Okay, next one. This is one of the largest land and sea shipping companies in the world. I'll just give you a hint. They're in the Europe region. And they had an interesting problem. It's a really interesting problem. The problem is this. Whenever there was a shipment, right, of a good, it could go 3 ways. Go rail, could go sea, or could go, what's his name, truck. But the problem is that when you start being a worldwide company, Eduardo's sitting in, I don't know, choose the country, right? I'm from Mexico, so I know, I'll use it in Mexico. Sitting in Mexico, may not know what are the news in Angola, or may not know France as well. You may say, well, France, maybe. Yeah, sure, but I don't think so, or Sao Paulo, or, you see my point? So even if I get the news of what's happening there, how can I warn a transport agent, like when the disaster and the terrible terrorist attack happened in Cannes, and it shut the port down for a couple of days. So how do I know to call the ship and say, sir, you got to reroute, right? Well, you can say it's automatic. Nothing, it's automagic. Somebody has been listening. But what's interesting about this system is that you can't rely on everybody knowing everything. Fair? So what this thing does is it aggregates the shipping routes, keywords, and news and weather alerts from all sorts of newspapers, media sources from the internet, and it sends alerts to both sides. So to the transport agent, it could be the truck driver, it could be the ship captain, it could be the train manifest, and to the corporate resource saying, hey, you should talk to each other. There's something here that potentially needs a reroute. Awesome system. Again, complete white space. So far, so good? Is this interesting? I know you're reading the architecture while I'm telling you this story. If you want me to go through the architecture, you tell me, but I'm thinking you can infer it from what you're reading. Is that fair? Still? We're still good? This is essentially a very cool event hubs with stream analysis on HD Insight. So basically what that is it aggregates all these, and through streams we aggregate the thought of what news goes to which shipping manifest relationship, and that's when we put on blob storage and on that data lake, and then we're doing DW for the representation on the mobile apps and the Power BI presentation. Okay, this is the one I love the most. You know why? Because it's the simplest and dumbest one, but in my point of view, if we don't have finished components, is the one that's impossible to build. Let me tell you the story. This is a very large health group in the US. Now, if you don't know, but one of the hardest, in my humble point of view, compliance, certifications, compliance, whatever, you could get is HIPAA. HIPAA is one of the nastiest ones out there. Why? Because you don't become compliant with HIPAA, you just become uncompliant. I don't know if you got this. This is like, I'm happily married, and you're never good, you're just not bad. Got it? So same thing with HIPAA. You're never good, you're just not bad, right? And the other thing that's pretty cool is you can very easily uncomply. Now, how do you do that? By storing any personal identifiable data or any personal health data, that's what PII and PHI means, on any storage that's not encrypted. And or use it in any method that's not encrypted. So, oh my God, right? So what we did, this is awesome, is we passed pretty much the data from users to Azure Storage, Azure Blobs, encrypted, and extract the metadata encrypted and search on it encrypted. How many assets did I need? 2. How much did I need to do? Nothing, because it's in the platform. That's pretty awesome. Good? Okay, I spent too much time on this. I'm not going to spend time on another 8. You can read this later. You can go see the videos. Why did I pick this 8? Because I like him. I don't know. But I can give you another 15, right? The whole point is go read stories, go learn about adjacent possible. What does that mean? It means that your solution is viable for everybody, not just you, right? So we can all learn from each other. I don't care about the industry. I don't care about the anything. We can all learn from each other. And patterns are patterns. Now, let me go quite fast into something that's really cool. These are 8 Magic Quadrants from Gartner, and this is just a sample. But this slide I love. It took us 9 years and a ton of effort to get a whole bunch of product groups to gain leadership in Magic Quadrants to this degree. And I think this is the best of the story that I'm trying to tell you, is that we're not just looking to be great at one piece. We're trying really to create a platform that you can build on, you can transact on, because the power of this is not that you're going to build one asset that's great, right? Oh, I'm building one component of machine learning that's awesome, but it doesn't integrate with anybody else in the industry. See, the real cool thing about this is that you can build a system that integrates with and plays well with, not just us, but others. Okay, I'm going to go quickly into the fundamentals. I already mentioned I'm from Mexico, so I have no concept of time, so you're going to have to tell me how much more time I have. Else I'm going to just completely run over and you're going to be mad at me. 18 minutes? That's awesome. Actually, I did good. There you go. So we have really good time to go through this. I was actually afraid you're going to say like 7 seconds. Here goes. Do me a favor. If you want me to go faster, you can actually say, dude. If you want me to go slower, you tell me, okay? This next session I find really important because I think that the specialization that we have in our industries is the key source of our success so far, right? So if you're an expert in blah, that has made you be very successful so far. But I also think that your ability to also gain the skill as an architect and understand what's around you and how you integrate is going to be not only a new skill, but an absolute required skill for you to be successful now. Because being an expert on MPLS to MPLS networking on routers is not going to take you to the next step. Because everything is getting commoditized. And so yes, you'll need that skill, but you also need the skill of understanding the grander picture. Fair? So that's what I'm going to spend my next 18 whatever minutes. So I always say 9 things, but the 9th thing I didn't put here, which is DevOps. So I'll skip my 9th thing, which is DevOps. I'll just say 8 things that you need to build an enterprise-grade cloud. Now, this is a fairly complex problem because when I say enterprise-grade, I go into the same dramatic philosophical conversation that I started with on what is an architecture. Fair? So please understand that this is my interpretation, not Microsoft's, my interpretation of what an enterprise-grade cloud is based on the, by now, I don't want to say thousands, but it's definitely more than 1,500 to 2,000 sample architectures I've seen that we're deploying in real cloud solutions. So why did I put networking as the first one on the list? Anybody? Okay, I'll tell you. Because everything else somebody has figured out. So if you tell me, hey, no, I'm not an IaaS person, I'm not a PaaS person, you'll figure it out. Hey, security, data residency, compliance, that somebody's going to figure it out. Maybe not you. I'm not kidding. Maybe not you, but somebody in your industry. Be careful. And if you don't believe me, there's 1,000 examples of somebody that figured it out versus somebody that didn't, and how they got disrupted. 1,000 by now. It's not just the Uber story or the I could tell or the Netflix story. You know what I'm saying? It's not just story A, B, or C. There's 1,000 now. It's scary. So my point is, all those somebody's going to figure it out. What is not going to be able to figure out is if you don't do networking right, and I click and it takes 5 seconds for a response, speed of light is not something you're going to figure out. Is that fair? So my point is, if you don't set up networking right, no cloud for you. That is step 0. Those of you who watch Seinfeld got that joke. So let's go into networking. This slide is not exactly correct. None of my slides are exactly correct because I'm trying to convey an architecture rather than the product today exactly does this or that. And I'll explain where it's incorrect so that you see that I'm not that daft. But I also want you to understand that I know I'm stepping on dangerous ground, okay? Mostly coming to this forum and speaking about this so openly. So the first thing is MPLS to MPLS communication, in other words, pipe to pipe, right? So putting a big pipe between your corporate environment and the cloud is a very common method for starting to think about this, but the wrong way to think about all network traffic. The cloud does not need for you to put a big pipe encrypted for anything that you pass through it. It needs it for some of it. But I want you to understand that it is up to you how you set up your peering so that the services that you use from a SaaS provider like Office 365, or there's no Azure Public and Azure Private, okay? So no announcements, don't look for crazy stuff like that, no. I'm just saying you can use Azure for public services for your company outside or for private services. That's all I was trying to say there. And yes, you could say right now the aggregation of Office 365 versus the rest is something that ExpressRoute is having. You can only do it by exception, blah, blah. Yes, I get it. But I try to put all three to explain that peering is very critical and encryption is very critical, but also just as critical is what you use to connect VPN traffic. Because a big chunk, over 50%, a big chunk of traffic on cloud is not necessarily through MPLS to MPLS, okay? So I want you to understand that it is critical in the cloud to determine what is it that you're gonna do, not just do it. It's not just a big set pipe and forget, okay? There are a ton of words on this slide. I'm not interested in draining it all, but you understand that I divided the whole thought on backend connectivity, front-end access. Now you're going to say, you got it backwards. Backend is the cloud. No. When you think of the cloud, backend is your customer's environment, right? Your data center. That's the backend. And the front end is going to be the cloud. Because again, the cloud can be used for backend, front-end, or middle tier. You see my point? That's why. And last but not least, native Azure security and virtual networking provide you with the thought that, oh my God, are you bleeding into other topics? Exactly. So there's no single topic on the cloud that doesn't bleed to the next. So when I talk to you about networking, I'm already inferring security. And then to infer security, I need to infer identity, or RBAC. Good? So let's talk about RBAC for a second. You have to start thinking about Azure Active Directory in three ways. The first way is as an extension of your current Active Directory, so you can provide things like remote access and capacity to expand things like whether it be desktop as a service, VDI, management, whatever, right? But any of those things. But also, you can think that could be an extension for something like Workday, a Cloud HR, or SAP, or you see what I'm saying? Some Office 365, great example, or another great example that you wish, that would be a SaaS provider, right? So Salesforce could be another SaaS provider. So my point is, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm not holding any bars. And I'm talking to you as hopefully as humble as an architect in the sense of, it is what you need to do, not what I want you to do as Microsoft. And so my point here is, this is an identity store that has served incredibly well the market, and it has a very, very large, right, over 90% market share. So it is incredibly strong source, but you gotta understand that you can use Azure AD, whether it be to extend your own, to use as itself as an identity store, or to use to connect to other identity stores, like Google Plus, and like LinkedIn, and like et cetera, Facebook. Now you see where I'm going? So it is those three. And the beauty here is the people that start thinking about it creatively on how to separate, segmentate, or join, depending on the scenario again. The other thing that's very important is that what you're getting is identity-driven security, which is super cool, because it provides you with the capacity not only to provide access, but also to challenge. And challenge could be MFA, but it could also be, so multi-factor authentication, but it could also be that you live in multi-factor authentication scenarios. So I always ask you for more than one. And if you do something funky like accessing a service that you shouldn't, I'll give you an example. You're in IT and you're accessing a financial server. You're like, what are you doing? You know? So give me two more factors of authentication. And that's not necessarily just a challenge, it could be regular function business. And then the other thing that you do is you block, obviously, and you log. But also as a preview here, you can do a lot of detection with some of the portals that we have that actually provide you not only identity threats and access, but have you ever heard of I love this one, the impossible travel scenario? Some of you have. It is when somebody tries to log on from Hong Kong and 2 hours later from the UK, from London. That's called the impossible travel, because physically you couldn't do it. So those are the type of scenarios and more, a lot more, that can get detected. So I don't know if you noted, but I bleeded from networking to security to identity to security. Security sadly appears in many, many places, so I can't just have a slide on security. It wouldn't be right, by the way. It wouldn't mean that I know what I'm talking about. And then Let's talk about subscription management, which is again also security because it also adds to access. Now, what is subscription management? This is something that until you get to the cloud, you call governance in your environments. But if you go to the cloud, it's called subscription management, right? And what does this mean? It means that I'm going to give you access to just specific assets. And you can do this through the Graph API of Active Directory. You can do this through Azure AD. Essentially what it means is what you get access to and how much of it. Right? So not just what can you do, but how much can you do. And all this can be programmatically addressed via the methods that I just mentioned before, but also by the ARM API. And you can go down to the resource level, you can go to the group level, you can go to the whole subscription. Let me breathe and ask you a quick question. You're doing good? Is this useful? I don't mean to be entertaining, I want to be informing. Are you getting entertained or informed? You're like, both. Well, I tried my best. I ironed my shirt, guys. Come on. It doesn't happen every Tuesday. Okay, let's talk about automation. Automation is really hard to talk about because it's like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about scripting? Are you talking about APIs? You're talking about modeling? You're talking about engines? You're talking about orchestration? You're talking about tools? You're talking about the market? Are you going to talk Chef, Puppet? You're going to talk about Kubernetes? You see what I'm saying? It's like, and explodes, right? Relax. You can't do this right, so let's do it wrong. Is that fair? Let me break it into 3 simple blocks and keep it to the Microsoft world for a second. Else, this slide is going to become 2 presentations. Cool? I know PowerShell is not just a scripting language, but let's just start there at least. Okay, it is a nice beginning to say that. And I know that ARM is not just an API, but let's allow it for this is like the, hello world in C that you wrote the first time. Right? Let's just start there. Let's just start somewhere. And let's start thinking that Azure Automation or the orchestration service is an orchestration. If you start there, you start making sense of the world a little bit. It's not only what they do. I put a lot of things there. But what I really like about what we're doing in PowerShell, and huge kudos to that team, is that we're not only going Windows, we're going Linux, is that we're expanding it, is that it's really become an adopted service by a whole bunch of the market, and that it's become a real simple way for you to understand one thing. If you're comfortable with cloud or you're not, do me a favor, stop thinking you want to, think of needs. I'll give you an example. If I tell you create 10 VMs, you're probably going to do it in the portal still. And you're going to get sick of it at the 7th click, by the way. But if I say create 70, trust me, you'll learn Visual Studio and you'll be coding an ARM in a second and doing JSON. Why? Because there's no options. So that's it. Get yourself out of options. And stop saying this, or to your colleagues, stop giving them an option of, oh, I don't know, my skill set can be obsolete. No, it's not your skill set. It's your needs. What do you need to do? Because if you have the need, trust me, all of us are pretty crafty. That's why we're all engineers. You see my point? So you'll get it done. It's not that, by the way, it's not that hard. I'm not kidding. And this is an online course that takes an hour or 2. So just go do it. Let's go into billing and cost management. Billing and cost management has 3 levels. Nobody is in level 1, okay? So, well, only if you're doing a trial subscription, you're on level 1. Level 1 is what we provide you as the billing platform. And this is any cloud provider. What the native tool is, it just doesn't cut it. It doesn't give enough. So what is level 2 and 3? Well, you can download and create the Azure Billing Portal, which is basically a database with a Power BI, and it does a pretty good work of you to tailor and really understand your cost and your spend and where and who's spending what on. So that's a really good tool that I highly recommend. Why is this such a hard problem that we got to give you a database with a portal and for you to go finish and build? Because the costing resource on each company can go very left to right, right? Some people are very, very detailed and need a ton, and some don't. And some need different governance methods, and some have their own structure that they built in the 70s, and some are startups that just need to know how much you spend, dude. So my point is, this is a really hard nut to crack and understand how to do the best for everybody. So there's no best for everybody. And the last but not least is, there's some really great solutions like Cloudin and Cloud Cruiser and Hanu that provide way deeper aggregation of multi-cloud, on-prem, or a deeper aggregation into your financial systems, and as well as activity-based management, activity cost management, if you're an old-timer like me and you remember those days. Cool? would you have put all these assets together like I'm doing? You see what I'm trying to do here? I'm sure you knew one, I'm sure you knew two, maybe you knew all five, but my point is, when you start putting them together, all of a sudden you feel like, by the way, I'm an old CIO. You used to, this is pretty formal. Yes, this can be as formal as you architect it. The problem is that you need to architect it that way. You don't just have to throw a couple of VMs and that's it. Next part is, I'm not going to give you an OMS talk, but it is management as a service. It is doing the OMS movement in the sense of do as much a correlation of your assets, because when you go to the cloud, you can do two things. You can either correlate your assets in a portal like OMS and create some dependency monitoring, bless you. But more interestingly enough, it gets pretty heavy in some scenarios, not everything. So this is not for everything, but it is for some scenarios that you need to go into App Insights and actually detect what's happening on each aspect, because your program now, or your system, is disaggregated across platforms. There's a piece that happens in your backend. By the way, nothing is not hybrid, okay? So let's get off of that bug, right? Everything is going to happen in multiple data centers, multiple places. Everything will have some type of forms. And even if you say that multi is the client, yeah. So the point there is, it's important that you get into this motion of this system actually needs a lot more inspection, okay? Now, backup and recovery. It's really cool what we've done with Azure Backup, that you can do data to data center, so data center to data center, data center to cloud, or data center to data center to cloud. But it's also very cool that with the exact same script and exact same tool, you can do cloud to cloud. The other thing is that when you're talking about backup, backup is exciting, but the really cool thing and reason for doing this is recovery. And what we've done there is not only site to site in the sense of Hyper-V or VMware, but also site to cloud. Let me stop there for a second. That is the biggest tool that we're finding for migration into IaaS in the market. And it is by far the simplest one. So I highly recommend that you spend some time with ASR as a way to migrate virtual machines to the cloud. You can do it with your hands, but this basically what it does a snapshot. Snapshot works, you're done. So it's an awesome way to do it. I'm not kidding. It's not like we did, okay, this is the only method. No, that is the first class scenario that we're building with ASR. So it is a really cool solution. Not just because we want to take stuff to the cloud, but because it is a really cool solution for doing snapshots. And then the last one is cloud to cloud, so region to region. We launched it on this Ignite, so that's pretty cool. That does not talk about multi-cloud, okay? That is still within just Azure. These are some of the clients and sources that I'm talking about. Okay, as I'm getting close to the end, let me just finish with the compliance. We've been doing compliance for years. And this says that we have a very big area that focuses just on not only gathering new compliances, but growing the compliance pool and being able to remain certified. It is incredibly complex. I don't know any other company out there that's doing such a big effort, right? I'm not kidding, and I'm even talking about cloud providers. So we have a huge team that just does this for a living, and there's going to be no person in your company or current or your customer's company that's going to have a bigger team of people, just in count of people, in count of processes to manage this. And then on top of that, you have to understand that we're doing things like security and isolation with all the assets that you're seeing there, but also RBAC and access control, things like just-in-time. Just-in-time, which happened in Azure, and now it's getting be released in Windows Server 2016. So what's really cool about that is you got to ask permission for what you're going to do, and at the time period, and you can only do that action in that time period, right? So even if you're an administrator, it gets logged, and you can't just do everything. That cuts most of the problem. Let me close down with Security Center. What I really like about Security Center is that it constantly assesses, and this is a benefit of Azure, it is part of Azure, of any subscription, it constantly assesses your security footprint, your threat footprint. So if you deploy Mongo, you deploy SUSE, you deploy Red Hat, you deploy Windows, you deploy, we know what the footprint is. So we come back and we give you a recommendation, not only on your threats and your attacks, but I don't know if you can read the screen, it says, enable data collection, secure your web application, enable SQL Server auditing, apply system updates, change your password, blah, blah. It does recommend in real time, all the time, what's your threat. There's no simple solution like this for on-prem that does all this. So understand, this is the benefit of the cloud. It's the benefit of doing it as a whole, right? Because this is a crazy complex system that has to live on the back end. My intention was humble. My intention was to give you 2 sessions in one in 45 minutes. The first part of the session was to show you we got to share architectures one with the other. We got to learn from each other, and there's an elegant, eloquent way to do this without disseminating private information or confidential stuff. You can show the pattern, you can show what it is for, and it is crazy useful. Is that fair? So please do that. In your forums, in your communities, participate, share, learn from each other. Second is, the cloud is not only ready for prime time, it's been ready for prime time 5 years. With all due respect, me as an architect, I'll tell you, I don't think we've been ready for 5 years. I don't think we have taken the challenge of saying, I'm going to architect an enterprise-grade solution with all the things out there. Was it harder 5 years ago than now? Absolutely, but now it is not that hard. So my best advice to you is for every cloud solution that you build, grab all the components, right? And if you want to add DevOps there, fine, that was the last piece that I said. But grab all the components, build a really robust environment, and demonstrate to your CIOs, CEOs, to your boards, and to your customers that this can be done in a professional grade, in an enablement way, in an agile method. So in other words, in months or weeks, not years. You know why? Because I don't want you to get disrupted, because somebody will figure it out. So my best wish for you this fiscal year, this calendar year, and the next 5, is go disrupt the heck out of the market in the most professional and profound way that you can. And let's go do some cool stuff. Thank you so much for coming to the conference. Truly appreciate you.